chapter, understanding the Ein Sof. Well, trying to understand the limitlessness of God, in our limitation. Excuse me. So what we spoke about yesterday in the act of creation, there is two basic ideas in God in creation. One is the infinite, and one is the finite. Which I just want to explain that for a moment. The Alter Rebbe actually doesn't go into this point, but I want to back up and appreciate that. If we say that God is infinite, that itself is some kind of definition. That's some kind of boundary, an infinite boundary, but a boundary no less, meaning that it has some form of qualification to it. It's infinite. God's infinite. That means what? He's not capable of being finite or being, expressing in some finite way. So in the end, when we refer to God, he's not infinite. He's beyond that. He is, in the terminology in the Hebrew, is atzmuto or atzmusai, depending how you pronounce things. Umehuto or mahusai. He's the essence. Core essence. The core essence is not infinite. Obviously not finite either. But it's neither. He's beyond both, and therefore can be expressed in both or found in both. And as we will actually come and appreciate maybe a little more later what that might mean, that he can be expressed in both. Well, we'll explain a little bit, but there's an ongoing conversation in this topic. So that expresses itself in two ways. One called Sovev and one called Memale in the vernacular and the Kabbalistic terminology. Sovev means to encompass, and we're going to get into that idea. What does it mean? The encompassing infinite light of God. And Memale means that which is, as we explained yesterday, that we went into that at length yesterday, that is a very reduced light that is incomparable to the infinite light of God. Incomparable, not even 1 to a trillion, because that is something comparable. That's, trillion is still a finite number. And one, even though, if you have $1 to $1 trillion, big difference, but it's still comparable. So that light, that what makes me unique, makes you unique, makes an animal different, or different animals and different vegetation, different than an inanimate object, all comes from or is specifically that very reduced, contracted light to such a degree that makes a difference between an animate object and a human being, for example. But at the same time, there's another force of God in creation, and that is that which is encompassing, that infinite light. And today we're going to discuss a little more what that means, encompassing. Encompassing is suggesting that it is transcendent, beyond. And yet, God says he fills the world. Not just his light fills the world of a reduced light of a very limited light of God, right, which fills the world, but that infinite light. So there's a finite world. How is it that we speak about that light of God is fills the world and yet is transcendent of the world? Seems to be somewhat of a contradiction. So it gives a metaphor. The metaphor is the expression of what it means to encompass. So the metaphor is that in my mind, right now, I'm looking at my Instagram, I'm looking at my Clubhouse, I'm looking at my Facebook page, each one, and I have an image of it in my mind. What do we call that image that's in my mind? We call it encompassed in my mind. Now, the thing itself isn't, but the image is encompassed in my mind. So it's there, but in an encompassing way. Now, that's just a metaphor to understand. So God says, I think it's in Isaiah if I remember correctly, in Isaiah, let's see, no, yeah, in Isaiah, he says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. What does that mean? Well, we're speaking about that God has an encompasses creation. As in my mind, the image now of the phone, the computer screen is encompassed in my mind, or the images of the people that I see in Clubhouse of your faces. It's encompassed in my mind. What does that mean? That image is there. By God, it's not the image. It's the actual creation itself. So in God's mind, as it were, in his being, in his encompassing of creation, in the act of creating, he's encompassing not the image, as I do in my mind right now, but actual creation itself. And in that regard, God's mind is, and he said, as in Isaiah, it says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, because we encompass the image of something, but not the thing itself. Now, just to give, this is very abstract ideas, and it's going to come, and it's a very short class again today, and where this is taking us is to appreciate the act of God as creator within the world, which is phenomenal, that on one hand, he's transcendent, encompassing, but yet found and here impacting, but impacting in a concealed manner, his infinite way. Because think about it for a moment. Now, we can appreciate with our minds, we can grasp that God is impacting in a diluted, contracted light, as we see, that we understand. We understand that a rock is a creation of God that's very different than a tree. Different, and a tree is different than an animal is greater, right? And a human being, even more so. And we understand how God animates the distinction within all of creation. We get that. But at the same time that God is animating, and this is the mainstay of his creative power, is not from that contracted light. By the way, as metaphor, we've given this before, just as my soul gives vitality to my body, and it gives it in a very specific manner to my eye, it gives it the capability to see. It's not the retina and the iris that is what makes me able to see. It's the power in the soul that when it's vested in a limited light of that soul into my eye, that gives the vessel, which is a container, which is the iris and all of the other parts of the eye, the capability of seeing. But it does it differently to the ear, different to my hand to be able to extend my arm, for example. So that we can understand, because we see that within our own very soul, with our own very being, that distinction. What we don't see, by the way, and it's interesting that maybe we can give a metaphor for this, is the all-encompassing power of the soul that gives life, which is similar to the all-encompassing, infinite power of God that pervades all of creation, but in a concealed way. That that if it wasn't concealed, if it was revealed, it would just obliterate us. Likewise with our soul. If our soul was fully engaged, and which, by the way, where's our soul find its first revelation is in the brain. Now it's interesting to note that the brain we use, what, 3%? Maybe Einstein used 6%. Imagine if the brain was fully engaged, or 50% engaged. Imagine if the soul was fully revealed. That fully revealed of the soul is an infinite quality. There's an infinite quality to it. That doesn't give specific power for the eye to see and the ear to hear. And with that, we can maybe understand, at least on a physical level, that if you take, oh boy, thought just lost me. Happens. It'll come to me. It was a metaphor to appreciate this idea, a powerful metaphor. Well, it comes for cloning, or if it comes to a part of the body that needs a healing, you can take from another part of the body, and it can, through cloning, you can actually rectify that other part. How's that possible? Is because there's a all-encompassing power of the soul that gives vitality that is not specific to any particular limb or particular part of the body, that has deep down in it the power to rejuvenate another part, which by the way, holistic medicine has also got that, is that concept. But that's all of a metaphor to understand and to appreciate that there is at the same time an infinite power of God that is concealed within creation, that's encompassing all of creation in a manner that we don't, that isn't revealed, isn't experienced, but is affecting us. What that means and the effect and everything is a very short class today that I made long. We're going to continue that thought tomorrow. But that's the idea. Where we're going with all of this is to appreciate, that God is creator, and then when we appreciate creation, God is creator, and then we can appreciate our relationship to God and how that is, should we say, all of the creative power, the infinite, the finite that is within creation, how that is not consequential, not important. I mean, yes, God does it, but that's not what he really wants. What he really wants is us. But we're going to get there to explain that more elaborated as we continue our discussion. But it's a very short class today. So again, the bottom line over here is that the infinite power of God in creation, Soviv, that encompasses all of everything in an equal manner. And in that respect, there's sort of like an equality. I don't know, equality is the right word, but everything is of the same within the creative force of this infinite power of God, is encompassing and encompasses, not just as in our minds we encompass an image of something, but encompasses all of creation in actuality. How that plays itself out, we're going to speak about that tomorrow. This is just actually a preface to that idea that will be further elaborated tomorrow. Okay. Any questions, any thoughts, what's your takeaway from this? What does that mean to you? When we speak about, again, which is amazing because on the human dimension, that we are either immanent or beyond, transcendent, or either one or the other. God, in the act as creator, is both at the same time, which is difficult to fathom, but we can understand how that, in fact, has to be. Okay. Sina, did you want to share something with us? Please, if you'd like to, by all means. Or I see Norm. Go ahead, Norm.
Thank you. Could you just? I want to try to wrap my mind around it because it feels abstract, as I know you said.
Yes.
Go
ahead.
To put it mildly, could you state the last part again, just please, just so I can wrap my mind? The last part I think was a kind of a summary, and there's something in the realm of God is infinite, and yet we can say, I don't know, God is infinite, and yet we can say He's infinite. So the fact that we can express it is in itself, that was my takeaway. I may have it wrong, but just tell me the last point again so I can sort of use it as a springboard for the day.
Sure. Thank you for that. So in God as creator, not in our relationship. We're going to get into what it means, our relationship to God, right? That is beyond what we're talking about now. But the segment that we're speaking about now, in as creator, there's two ways that He is within creation. One is immanent, and that is by way of metaphor, like how the soul is immanent within my eye to give my eye the capacity to see, within my ear to hear, and my arm to act like to reach out. And at the same time, God is found in a very hidden way within creation. His infinite power, His infinite being. If it were to be revealed, we would then not have any sense of self, independence. We would be like the ray of sun within the sun, that is sort of, part of the globe of the sun. And so God hides that from us, but in fact is impacting us nonetheless, but not in a way that we experience and can fathom. And that's what it means that He is encompassing. Encompassing as we use that term, for example, in our minds. We encompass the idea, the image, as I'm, encompassing the image of you right now, Norm, that's on my phone, your icon, right? That's encompassed the image. But by God, the image of a thing is not encompassed. The thing itself is, in actuality. And again, we don't experience that because that's hidden from us. Is that clearer? Does that resonate?
Yes, right now I'm feeling like He's part of the, because I'm continuing your body metaphor, part of the autonomic system of the body. Everything is functioning. We don't necessarily think about it or see it. But when we need to use part of the body, He's there activating it or motivating it.
Right. Actually, thank you for mentioning that. The Lubavitcher Rebbe once way from Reagan brought up a story of a professor who was studying the everything that it takes to take a footstep, right? Simple single footsteps. The muscles that are involved, the ligaments, the bone structure. I don't even know myself, but whatever it is that's involved. And just for one step, it is such a complicated and so involved that he was so, in Yiddish we say fatif, so deeply entrenched in it that he tried to move, he couldn't move. So the automatic thing that we are so take for granted, at that moment he was so engaged, he lost for the for somewhat of a moment or so that capacity. So yes, there is the light that is within creation that is so reduced, but yet so intricate that, as the soul gives its unique light to the eye to see, to the ear to hear, and so on, that even that little thing is so detailed and so phenomenal that, when we start thinking about it, that itself is very awesome. And that's the immanent light. But then there's the transcendent, there's beyond. That's where it says in Isaiah, my thoughts, God says, are not your thoughts. Because our thoughts encompass an image. God's thoughts encompass the thing itself, all of creation encompassed. And that's hard for us to, well, we don't experience it. It's hard for us to imagine what that means. Or, I mean, we can imagine what it means because we have it in our thoughts. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Anybody? Go ahead, Norm. You would anything more to share?
Well, I was also, quote unquote, clapping, but I did have one last conclusion just to repeat back what I was getting from you. Namely, right now you said we're not talking about a relationship, so right now we're admiring God. We're not yet talking about our interaction. I mean, I use the word admiring, but you said we'll talk about the relationship tomorrow, but right now it's just sort of contemplating some aspects of God.
Very good. Well said. So let's put it into human terms so we can relate to it. There is what a person does, right? And there's a person who they are. And then there is my relationship to that person. So likewise with God, there's God what he does. That's what he does. It's not who he is, not my relationship to him. What does he do? He creates. That's what he does. He creates. We're going to get into very deeply this concept in the second part of Tanya, starting in a few weeks, of what he does and how he does it in a very deep and intimate way. And what's important is, just like on a human level, there is an appreciation we need to have of what a person does in their life. The good stuff that they do, and to appreciate that of them. Now, that being said, what they do is not them, doesn't define them, right? So likewise with God, it doesn't define God. He's beyond that. And it doesn't define my relationship to him. Just like in the human terms, if my relationship is defined by what you do, then that's a very external, a very a shallow relationship. Then I'm only appreciating the things that you do, whether you do it for me or you do it for others. But there's a much deeper bond that there is, or there can be at least, I should say, that there can be between two friends, family, and obviously, that goes beyond what a person does, and that's the relationship that we have. Does that resonate, Norm?
So it's the pragmatic and the emotional?
I think it's even beyond the emotional. A relationship is not, you're pragmatic, yes, in what you do, but I think, is a person defined by their emotions? That's a part of that's
and spiritual, pragmatic and other than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. I right. That's what you meant.
If you wish.
Right. Or the spirit of the person. Right. The soul of the person.
Spiritual.
Yeah. The spirit. The soul of the person, which the spiritual comes from that soul. So then there's a connection to the soul of the person, and that includes, of course, that will express itself. And actually, you're right, Norm. Maybe just putting in a different vocabulary. The soul of the person will express itself in their character, which basics of character is, of course, the emotional makeup of the person. So yes, very true, and very real. So likewise with our relationship to God. So there is so to speak, the soul of us, which is sort of the core essence of us. So there's a core essence of God that we have a relationship to. And then there is the way God expresses himself through divine intelligence and divine emotions. And that we have a connection and a connection to that. Yeah, absolutely. I hope that is getting clearer. But thank you for, sort of inspiring me to clarify the idea, so it, and even in my own mind, becomes clearer for me, and I hope for everybody else too at the same time.
Can I ask one last one? I'm sorry I don't need to turn this, but it's a good dialogue. So
Absolutely. Go ahead. Go for it.
Last one, I think.
Don't qualify.
Okay, next one. Can we be in touch with our soul? And I guess we could talk about the God. And right now, just as individuals, as people, do you feel we can be in touch with our soul all the time, as much as we want at any time, at will, almost?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes and no. Potentially, yes. In reality, where we're at, that's going to be a difficult job. Let me explain why. Because when we speak about the soul, we're talking about the divine soul, as opposed to the body, which is animated by the animal soul. We have the higher self and the lower self. The higher self is the pure good and godly that's within us, and the lower self is the selfish, animal, kind of instinctual person that we can be, that is based on the body having its own agenda and its own desire, which is basically the opposite, self-fulfilling, self-directed, and so on. So the righteous people, what does it mean righteous? Someone who's taken that nature within them, that lower self, and has transformed it, and it now becomes not an obstacle to the higher divine self within them. They've been able to transform that. So therefore they're attuned to their soul at all times. They are transparent to it. They are transparent then to not being needy, which the body is very needy. It's needy for food. It's needy for comfort. It's needy for pleasure, right? It needs those things. The higher self, the godly self within us, doesn't need anything. All it wants is connection. It wants divine connection, and through the divine connection to make connections here, and how it could be, how it is, what it's needed for. What am I needed for? So if we are constantly aware, and this is from the divine part in us, of what I'm needed for, not what I'm needy of, so that's being attuned to our soul. But, to be quite frank and honest, I could speak about myself. I know my body sometimes talks and says, I've got my own agenda and I want it fulfilled. And sometimes my other self, my other, higher self speaks and says, okay, don't give in to that, to that lower self. And sometimes you give in to it. So do we have the capability, the potential? The potential is there. Are we going to realize it? Well, if we allow our lower self, which is the animal soul giving vitality to the body, and give into its agenda, which again is self-directed, being needy. I need this, I want that, and I lust this, I've got an addiction for that, and so on and so forth. Then we're not going to be that's covering up the capability of being attuned to our higher soul. I hope that resonated, Norm, and that was clear in what I expressed.
Thank you.
God bless. Alice, when Hashem's light is revealed with Mashiach, how can we be unique and a unique entity? Oh, that's a good question, Alice. Alice is asking a good question on Facebook. times of redemption of Mashiach, this infinite light will actually be revealed. So how do we have a unique, separate? How do we become separate entities, or at least unique creations? If that happens, you're gonna have to come to my course for that, which I think you're already signed up. 6-week course starting next Wednesday. You can go to JLI Montreal for more information on that. But yeah, we're gonna have to wait for that because that's gonna take some real explanation. Darren, how can I elevate my soul to the light when my body is sick? Oh, yes. So, by the way, what does it mean a sick body? What does it mean when we're sick? What does it mean sick? So, when you feel your back, what do you have? You have a backache, right? When you feel your head, what do you have? You have a headache. When you feel yourself, that's being sick. Feeling and the stronger you feel, I must have this. I gotta be that. I've got. The more you feel yourself, the sicker we are. Right? The more we are attuned to not my needs, but what I'm needed for, that's healthy. And that's not so much about the physical healthy body. It's more about attuned to the higher self that we can be. Yes, having a body that isn't feeling well definitely makes it harder. We gotta ask God that we should be healed. And I gotta do my shoulder exercises so I can feel, it won't feel the pain sometimes I have in my shoulder and my neck. So I do some exercise. Should do more, but yes. Dave.
Hey, Rabbi, good morning.
Good morning. Thank God.
Good
How are you?
Good, Baruch Hashem. If it's okay, I just wanted to interject a bit on Norm's last question about, that potential, that opportunity to always tap into our soul. And your answer was beautiful and so clear. It's really like Tanya 101, right? That, we have this animal and we have this animal soul and this godly soul. And they're always competing, who's going to essentially be driving the car. Who's going to be taking the reins. And I think it is important to keep in mind what our goals are, right? And in the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe does lay out clearly that the goal is not to be a tzaddik, like Rabbi Fine described, a person that has completely removed the animal and has tapped into the soul, because it's very rare and it's very difficult, especially in the times that we're in today's day and age. The goal is rather to be what's called that Beinoni, that intermediate, that sort of middle ground, which is that, we have both souls competing. We have those animal drives, but we sort of quiet them down. And the analogy of the car is that we take the wheel, we haven't thrown the animal out, we sort of just let him sit in the back seat, because that keeps us going. I think that struggle of soul versus body, of spiritual versus physical, that's actually what fuels us and allows us to keep living life in a little bit more of a passionate way. Whereas if it was all soulful, who knows? It could get a little, I wouldn't say boring, but we lose a little bit of that fire. And the one point I really wanted to add on, what sort of gives me sometimes peace of mind, is that if I'm going through, I guess, more of an animalistic state, where you feel that your desires are kicking in, or you feel a little bit more disconnected from your soul, from God, the way to look at the soul is almost like a fruit, right? It's like, imagine an orange, right? So if you took a bite into an orange as it is, so it's going to taste quite bitter, right? Because the peel is still on there. But as soon as you take off the peel, there's this delicious fruit that is as fresh as it was essentially on day one if you eat it at the right time. That's the soul, is that no matter how much layers that you have on you, you could live a life completely immersed in sin and physicality, but on the deepest level, that soul remains pure. And it just becomes more difficult to find it because there's peel after peel after peel after peel. But the point is that awareness, I think that's really what I wanted to add to your question, is that the goal maybe is not always to tap in, but it's being aware. Is that even if I don't feel my soul, I'm aware that I have a soul, and that no matter what I do, it's always going to be pure. It's always going to be fresh. And I hope that one day I can tap into it and appreciate the taste and the energy that it gives me.
Thank you, Dave. Very nice. Very nice, always. Appreciate it.
May I ask a question?
That's nice.
Vilma, sure. Go
How
ahead.
does the ego relate to the animal soul? Because it's my understanding that the ego gets in the way. It's part of people's urges to be right, blah, blah, blah.
A very good question. So the ego is, is most definitely part of the animal soul. Part of the ego is it's all about me, right? I'm the center of the universe, and that's exactly, the body can only feel its own pain. The soul can feel or empathize the pain for another. So the ego is about me. The body, desires comfort for itself. It doesn't know what comfort would be for another. And this is no, condemnation on the individual. This is, the how God created us, and as Dave said, creates the struggle between, the body and the soul, between the higher self and the lower self, that we engage in, and so that's where the ego, is that it's all about me. And me, what does it mean it's all about me? That will express itself in the desires that I have, the needs that I want to have fulfilled, and from needs creates lusts, from lusts to addictions, and so on. So needs don't have to be bad things, but the focus of it's not a bad thing. It's a limiting thing. And it's limiting in the sense that it's about me. So, for example, when it comes to even doing good, right? So it's not material versus spiritual even. It could be, let's say you're doing good. You're giving charity or you're helping somebody. But if you're doing it based on being needy for something, in other words, recognition, or just feeling good about myself because I've got holes in my soul that don't make me feel good about myself. I feel insecure. So when I do good for another, that makes me feel wonderful about myself. That's ego. Then it's about me. So you're just the object. I'm objectifying you. And even though the act was a beautiful act, and I'm not taking away from the act, but it's missing the higher self, the soul, the divine, because then I'm doing it out of my need. And that's, ego ultimately, as opposed to being attuned that I'm doing this because God created me for a purpose. He needs me to do this act of kindness. This is part of my mission of what I've got to do. So I'm doing it, fulfilling a higher purpose of living that God created me, needs me to fulfill. That's a very different frame of reference. That's not how we contextualize our lives, but this is the capacity that we have of putting things in those terms. So, like, I just want to give an example. Someone's married, so you could do it for your spouse, but you could do it out of the fear that if you don't do it, oh boy, she's going to say that about me, or she's going to think this about me, and therefore that's what motivates you. So then you're not doing it for her or for him. You're doing it for yourself, right? On what they're going to think of you or what they might say to you. But if you can get to a place, and by the way, we're human, so that's going to happen. And we're going to hear that voice in us. But then if I could say to myself at that moment, well, you know what? Don't get caught over there. Be aware that, you know what? I got to do this because this is the right thing, and it's the appropriate thing, and she needs me to do this. She needs me to be there for her in this way. So then that's a whole different language. You're might do the same action, but first of all, you'll do it differently. You'll do it in a much more sensitive way, being there for them rather than really in the end for yourself. And you'll be able to and really connect in a healthy way because you're making it about them and not you. Is that clear, Vilma? Is that?
Yes, I think I can tell the difference between righteous and self-righteousness. There's a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, by the way, the healthiest place to tell that is in ourselves. Don't look at other people and try to judge them on that. We do that. We do that, but be healthier not to do that because then we become self-righteous and, you know, and other people's intent. If someone did kindness to you, just accept it. For yourself, you know, we gotta, you know, and we gotta look a little deeper in ourselves. But for someone else, just accept it. Okay. I hope that all resonates. Anybody else have some question or comment? I'm trying to look over here. On Facebook, if you have a question, please put a question mark before your question.
Rabbi?
Yes, Batya, go ahead.
Hi, you have two people that had questions. One was Yossi, and another was Jane, who had questions here on Facebook.
Okay, I'm looking. It's a looking. And I'm not doing. All right. I'm missing it, I think. Sometimes the feed, you lose something on the feed, and I wonder if I lost it. And if it could just be copied and pasted again. Oh, yes, if God exists equally in everything, then why do we say that he prefers one way of our living than another way? Yes, that's a great question. Thank you. All the way from Australia. Because that's God of Creator. In what we do in our lives, in our relationship to God, that touches his essence. And we're not actually talking about that in the discussion over here, but that touches God himself as opposed to what God does. So that's why there's a difference. But great question, and thank you for asking that so we give a little more clarity. Mary, so our soul has a higher and a lower soul. Is that good and evil? So, you know, there's different ways to call it. Higher soul means that your divine soul. The lower soul is your animal soul that animates your body, that work, you know, together of being very self-directed, which includes ego, includes pleasure-seeking. You know, my body wants to be comfortable. It doesn't care about anybody else's comfort. Not my body. My soul does. My soul now, my animal soul can care about your comfort only as much as that it's directed in the end for my benefit. Now, benefit could be, you know, I'm really nice to you. That, you know, here, sit down and have a nice, comfortable place to sit, and here's a cup of tea or whatever to make you comfortable, because you know, I don't want you to think badly about me, or I want to ingratiate myself towards you. So in the end, that's I'm doing that for my benefit. The higher self, or the godly self, will be because this is the call of the moment. This is what I'm needed now in this moment of my life, to be there for you, and that's what God wants of me, and that's what you need from me. So yeah, that would be. So thank you, Batya. I hope I think I got. Yeah.
Jane Bautista also had a question, and also Alice Gross has another question.
Okay, I see Alice. Does the act of tzedakah become more elevated with the lishma attitude? Yes. So let's get something very clear over here. When we're talking about motivation over here. There's the act and then the motivation, the intent behind the act. The act of being charitable, the act of praying, the act of doing a kindness towards another has a value in and of itself, no matter what our intent is, even if it is self-directed, even if it's for my benefit. So if I'm being charitable and I gave $1 or $1 million, whatever it is, right, for feeling good about myself that I did good, or for getting the recognition for the giving that I gave. So there's two separate things here. The action is an end in itself. It's a mitzvah to be charitable. It's a mitzvah to put on your tefillin. It's a mitzvah to light your Shabbos candles as an end in itself, the act. So that itself has value. Now, for it to have a more divine, motivated, and higher self motivation, that's what we're talking about over here. So that's, we need to separate between the two things. And I actually, very important, I don't want anybody to go away from here thinking that if you did something, and thank you, Alice, for bringing this up, because I don't want you to think for a moment that if we do something, and we will, I do it, speak about me, I do things sometimes on autopilot without really, thinking properly or being present, being engaged in that moment. And it's a good act, whether it's being charitable, whether it's a prayer, saying a blessing, or whatever it is, right? Or connecting to another person and doing something for them, and I'm not totally present. It was an act of kindness. It was being charitable. It was a prayer. The act itself has a connection to God. It's not illuminated. It's not an illuminated action, but it is a divine action because it's something that God needs from us. Well, the point for being over here, to bring it to the next level, is to have the awareness of, why am I doing this act? I'm doing this to fulfill the purpose I was created for, what God needs from me, rather than that I'm a needy person that needs this to benefit me in whatever way. If we do it with that mindset of the benefit there is for us, it doesn't take away from the action. It's just not fully illuminated godly act, but it is nonetheless a divine act. I hope that's clear. And that's actually very important that we have that notion, because I don't want to, people are going to be so, I'm not doing this for the right reason. I'm terrible. I'm not going to do it. No, just do it. Or as I say, just Jew it. Just do the Jewish thing. Even if it is self-directed, if it's ego motivated, if it's pleasure seeking that you have in doing that nice thing and wonderful mitzvah. Just do it. But of course, also work at the same time to be a little more evolved. Vilma?
So this is all like doing good things, doing mitzvahs, but like I think there should be an awareness about, the urges of the ego to also, hurt people or, just do negative things. There's a difference between that, because that's not justifiable.
Absolutely correct. You're right. We're not talking about any of that, because I think anybody that's here, I hope, is committed to the notion of goodness and kindness. But you're absolutely correct that anything that's negative, that's wrong, absolutely, an evil action, absolutely, there's no room for that. And but we fail. We talk ill about people. We do that, and so there's always owning the wrong that we've done to our soul, the wrong that we've done to others, to them, and owning it and doing and fixing it. That's what tshuva is, exactly.
It's an awareness, and it's beautiful to recognize, within ourselves that we're just as infallible as others.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Mathilde is ask. Oh, okay. So the 6-week class, yes, I just put it up. Is jlimontreal.com. I put it up now on Facebook, so you should have it there. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. And yeah. Okay. Very good. All right, folks. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Beautiful discussion. Really appreciate.
Sorry, I meant fallible, not infallible. No one's error free.
Very good. Sina, did you want to share something? Okay. Thank you, Vilma, Batya, Norm. Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't. I don't really have anything to share. I just couldn't get open my screen back up. I'm actually working right now. Like I said yesterday, I enjoy listening to these. Sometimes they're hard to grasp, but I think for the most part, I got today that God is beyond what we can physically touch, but He also is like more than the essence of like a plate or something like that. Anything physical, and that I'm sorry. I'm trying to work, and I wasn't really planning on talking, but I'm gonna mute myself now, and thank you.
Thank you, Sina. That's you're right. Sometimes the ideas, being that they're of the spirit, they're abstract, and sometimes it's hard to put it into words, especially if you're working and you've got other responsibilities. So it's hard to put it into the words that in our mind and our thoughts we may have a greater clarity, and then in the words it just doesn't come out the way we would like to. But I know that you got it, as you've been learning with us for a while. So thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. Okay. I think that's it. I want to thank everybody. Great conversation, great learning. To be continued tomorrow, of course, every day, Monday through Friday, 9:30, Sundays at 10:30. For those who didn't have a chance to follow, you can, if you'd like to, you can follow me or Chabad on Clubhouse. And a reminder that this afternoon we have some more learning. I'm going to do, actually it'll be on Clubhouse this afternoon at 12:45, Jewish Ethics, Pirkei Avot, which is great learning of the uniqueness of Jewish ethical teachings. So that's at 12:45 this afternoon. You can join us. That's going to be also on Facebook, on Chabad ZK on Facebook. ZK is standing for Zichron and Kadeshim. And what else? I think that's it for the moment. Vilma, Batya, anything, parting words?
Rabbi, well, there was a couple of questions that two different people have. Right at the earlier, Jane Batista has a question, and also Mary Schulmeyer, I think I'm saying it correctly.
Yeah, okay, yes.
About
okay, Mary, you private message me so we can help out. Read the course, not a problem. I didn't see Jane. Sorry. I don't see it here. I'll have to come. Oh. Is it right to say that since our soul is our core essence, nobody is indeed evil? Your actions can be evil, but that soul either a part of God or the image of God, created in the image of God. So there's a value to it. Yes, that's there's a truth to what you're saying. What that means, we're gonna have to we'll get more into it. But yeah, I see that. Just a reminder on Facebook, whoever's asking a question, please put 2 question marks first. That's why I didn't see your question, Jane. That makes it easier for me to pick it up. All right, folks. We'll see you later. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron in Kadesh, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, and thank you, Bachi, for keeping everything on, keeping me